Okay. So Hare Krishna, welcome to our Gita Gyan level 2. We are continuing with our special topic, but before we begin, we will just dedicate our presentation to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, and you can join me with the Mangalacharan prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajadam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanushute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jayatam Shurato Pangur Mama Manda Matir Gati Matsarvasva Padam Bojo Radha Madanamo Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatharine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Thank you for chanting with me. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vigna Vinasha Narasimhaiti Namine Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayatim Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Sri Chaitanya Mishwaram Om Tatsat. So Hare Krishna, thank you for joining me. So we are now continuing with our Gita Gyan. So today's topic is, wait a minute. Okay. Don't know why, hang a bit. Okay. Today's topic is scientific spirituality. So basically we want to contrast, we want to show how spirituality is not sentiment. It is very, very scientific, and how actual scientific inquiry and logic is very applicable to spirituality, and how nowadays what is actual scientific inquiry is now being it's actually not really the same spirit which they are using in modern day science. You can see a lot of fallacies in science currently, especially nowadays. So we want to first, there are several parts to this topic. So we will begin with the idea of how understanding God is actually a very scientific process. So we will begin with trying to see God. So, you know, this entire creation, universe and everything. So someone may challenge you, show me God. Where is God? I cannot see. If you say there is such a thing as God, if you say so much about spirituality, but where is that God? So sometimes scientists will say, so-called modern scientists, some of them, that since I cannot see God and you cannot see God, therefore God must not exist. So this kind of logic is, it's not a very good logic, because, we could also say, I cannot see your brain, you cannot see my brain, so therefore you must not have a brain. So one could argue like that. Of course, then you can say, okay, I will show your brain by X-ray vision. So like that, indirect ways are there to show the presence of something. So the Lord, he reserves the right to show himself only to those, because it doesn't matter to him. He only wants to show himself to those who are interested to actually, who are not envious, who are interested to have a relationship with him. And he tests our faith, and through the words, he wants to see how much we are able to develop that faith. And eventually we are able to see the personality of Godhead face to face. Prabhupada says that you can see the Supreme Lord face to face directly, eventually. But there are many ways to see him. So therefore he says in Gita, I am never manifest to the foolish and the unintelligent. And then in other places also he says, I am never manifest to the envious. Like you see, Duryodhana, there were so many people telling him that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Narada told him, all his, Bhishma Dev told him, Dronacharya also told him, so many people, even Dhritarashtra, he had doubts, and then he told Duryodhana, I think Krishna, you better not cross him. But still, he begged Duryodhana actually, because at one point of time, Krishna was supposed to come and ask for settlement between the Pandavas and the Kauravas. They were about to have the war, and then Yudhishthira Maharaj requested Krishna, and Krishna went to the Kaurava kingdom, and he's like a peace messenger. He said, okay, can we settle this without a war? And Dhritarashtra advised so much to Duryodhana, please take this chance. Krishna is not ordinary. Because Duryodhana wanted to kidnap Krishna. He wanted to actually capture Krishna and trap him. So he wanted to give a feast, and then in the name of the feast, he wanted to put a trap for Krishna. But Dhritarashtra begged him so many times, no, no, no. But still Duryodhana could not understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So many wonderful activities Krishna did, but still he cannot see. And similarly, people are like that. Even when the Lord appeared 5,000 years ago, there were people who did not want to accept the Supreme Lord as the personality of Godhead. So many of them, Shishupal, Duryodhana, Dantavakra, Kamsa, all the different demons. So I am never manifest to the foolish and the unintelligent. But still, anyone who is claiming to follow a scientific process, or who has some modicum of intelligence, they can at least begin to, definitely they can learn to see there is such a personality. They cannot deny it. So let's take a look at that, how we can see. If we look around us, right, this is based on logic. We see wonderful creations around us, very beautiful environment, situations. We see colorful flowers, plant life, fragrant roses, so beautiful, so wonderful, the fragrance, vivid colors in everywhere that we open our eyes. We see best swimmers, interesting living entities. We see a symmetry of colors, all naturally created, all different kinds. We see exotic creatures, which sometimes beyond the imagination, and so wondrous, exotic creatures with such a rainbow of colors. We see also exotic plant life, not only in the animal kingdom. We see plant life, very interesting. You can see here the patterns, the geometric shapes, the patterns, the arrangement, right? The colors, the imagery, the mimicry. And at the same time, we also see interesting structures. Now, what's the difference between all this, right? When we see this structure, obviously we understand, right? This structure is made by man, right? We see wonderful things made by man also. So, you know, when somebody looks at this car, this is a McLaren car, right? So it didn't just appear, didn't it? So somebody manufactured it. So this is the McLaren boss. He manufactured this McLaren car, right? So like that, we understand. And then we see a very complex flying structure, an aeroplane. So obviously, someone assembled it. It didn't just appear. So similarly, we see a beautiful, very highly complex looking watch. So someone designed it. So this is Louis Monet watch. And likewise, we see structures. Certainly, someone built it, right? And we see this kind of, this is in Italy. Very, this is one of the fountain structures. So obviously, someone carved it. And then we can see also, these are all man-made things. Huh? So we see a nice, interesting cake. Wow, so beautiful. Someone prepared it. We can understand. And in the same way with art, you know, the Mona Lisa, we will ask, who is the artist? We all know, right? Leonardo da Vinci. So there's also landscape art, beautiful landscape art. People try to paint the landscape. So Timothy Parker is the artist for this one. So we know. So similarly, when we see in real life, beautiful scenarios like this is the Grand Canyon, one of the areas in the Grand Canyon, then we will ask, who is the artist, isn't it? If all these other things, there are someone who has created them, then why not? Certainly, there is a great artist or a great personality behind the creation that we see all around us. Just consider the sun. The sun, the energy emitted by the sun per second is greater than the amount of energy human species has consumed throughout its history, entire history, based on what modern science looks at it. So this is per second. So much of energy is being created, almost unlimited amounts of energy. We cannot even reproduce 1/1,000,000th of this kind of energy on Earth. And yet it is only one of the countless entities in the sky. So the question, who is the master designer? So obviously, someone must have created this. So therefore, simple logic suggests that if all these man-made things were created by someone, so therefore any creation also implies a creator. So this is the first logic given to you, right? So then let's continue looking around. So creation implies a creator. So, but if you continue looking around, we don't only see creation, we also see organizations. We see organizations everywhere. For example, Microsoft Corporation is an organization. And this organization has head offices in all these places, Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, and blah, blah, blah. It's well-managed, world-renowned company with operations around the world. But we can understand behind this organization, there is a personality, right? When we talk about Microsoft, we talk about Bill Gates, right? And now the current CEO is Satya Narayana. So he's IIT graduate. So, but we understand there is a person behind. So similarly, Google CEO, behind Google is the force of the personality behind it, Sundar Pichai currently. These were the founders, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, but this is the current CEO. So we know there's somebody behind it. What about Facebook? Obviously, this person is the Zuckerberg. Now it's, of course, Meta, right? So these are all personalities behind that. There's a brain behind it. So behind an organization, there is a brain behind, there is a person. So similarly, behind Malaysia, when we say Malaysia, so who's the boss of Malaysia? So yeah, sensitive topic. So Mahathir comes to mind, you know, for so many years, dictator and all that. So now, of course, we have all kinds of characters. So similarly, when we look at US, behind this flag, one personality comes in mind, right? So there is a person heading it. So in the same way, all the stars visible in the naked eye. So this is the map, the known map of the entire galaxies, different galaxy clusters within what is known as the galaxy cluster, approximately 9,000 stars and 88 constellations. This is the galactic coordinate map. So many different interesting structures and creations, right? We just have to open our eyes. You know, if you go camping or if you go to some rural area, the sky becomes very clear because no pollution. So you can see wonderfully lots of stars. So you can see the beautiful creation of the cosmos. So who governs this kind of arrangement, this organization of the cosmos? So let's see what some of the greatest scientists have to say. So this is Isaac Newton. Everybody knows Isaac Newton, whether or not we know his formulas or not, right? Newton's first law, second law. Newton's third law is very famous because it's the law of karma also. So he says, this being governs all things, not as the soul of the world, but as the Lord over all. And on account of his dominion, he is to be called Lord God, universal ruler. So Isaac Newton, widely recognized as one of the most influential scientists of all times, right? And father of the scientific revolution. So this is what Newton says. He accepts that there must be, it's scientific and it's logical, that there is God behind creation, behind organization. Okay, now I've given you creation, I've given you organization. So let's look at a third aspect. So still looking around, we can see that there is some form of law everywhere, isn't it? So the same law Newton discovered, right? Newton's first law, Newton's second law, Newton's third law, right? The law of gravity, F equals to mg, so weight equals to mg. So all these equations, the law of, and then this is Archimedes' law. You know how Archimedes, he wanted to know the displacement of volume is equal to the weight of the person. So Archimedes' law. So like that, there are different types of law. There's the law of thermodynamics. There's the law of different aspects. The law of energy conservation. So there is different laws. And at the same time, we can see around us also. We don't have to be scientists to understand this. We can see we have the 4 seasons. We have, you know, how the sun moves towards the northern hemisphere, right? Pongal starts when the sun moves towards the northern hemisphere. And then after that, it goes towards the southern hemisphere, somewhere during the Mooncake Festival, right? That's the time it marks the sun traveling. We call it the summer, the winter solstice, the winter equinox and the summer equinox, the changing of the seasons. So it all follows a certain law. And we can also see the moon. The moon also follows a certain law. From full moon, it becomes, you know, Amavasya, then after that, Pritipat, Dvitiya, Tritiya, Chaturthi, Panchami, Saptami, Ashtami, so like that. And then we have also the sun. Every day without fail, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. So it follows a certain law. So when we say law, then it implies who is the lawmaker. So someone has made the law, because the law is very precise. How is it that the sun rises in the east and only sets in the west? Why not one day it goes in a different direction? It's very precise. And you know, the seasons, how they all move in a certain way. So then we may say, what about nature? So nature also acts in its own law. There are, you know, during autumn, the leaves will drop, and you know, how it will grow. You know, plants, they will try to grow towards the sun. So these kind of things are there. So when we say nature, then the question also may arise, whose nature? You know, we all have our own nature, right? We are somebody's nature. He has a sweet nature. Oh, she has a very sour nature, maybe somebody will say. So like that, nature implies a personality. So whose nature? So mother nature, we sometimes say. So like that implies a personality. There's a person behind it. So similarly, you know, in space technology, so we talked about law, right? We talked about creation, we talked about organization, we talked about law. So all these things implies a personality behind it. So now let's look at space technology. Now in space technology, okay, for example, we have satellites. Now these satellites, man may become very proud of these satellites. They launch a satellite and everything. But in order to control the satellite, they have very elaborate setup, right? This is the Deep Space Network Mission Control, where they actually monitor, and you know, such complicated machinery, such complicated setup, so many people sitting here monitoring day and night just to see how that one miserable satellite is moving around. So that is satellite monitoring. Many things they have to note. Around the clock, of critical observation of the critical parameters. What kind of parameters? For example, orientation, how the satellite is oriented, the spin of the satellite, right? The velocity of the satellite, how fast it goes, the Earth satellite distance. We don't want it to come too close, then it will start crashing and entering into the atmosphere. The temperature control. So all these things are closely monitored. If all this is necessary, even just for a simple satellite, can you imagine? Look at the orbits of planets, how the planets move and orbit around. And we see here how Earth is spinning in a particular axis. Just 2 degrees tilting of, more than 4 degrees tilting of the axis of the Earth. And the scientists say we cannot survive already. Earth's atmosphere will not support human beings, even if just 4 degrees a bit off. So who controls their orbits, their spin, their velocity, their temperature control? It's very interesting. So this is the galaxy. So who is the universal lawmaker? Who is the artist? Who is the designer? Just look at this galaxy spin. Such a specific way it is spinning, right? Who is the organizer? And ultimately, who is the creator? So it implies there is a person, a creator. This is logic. This is sense. So therefore, we see abundant evidence everywhere of intelligent design. Can anyone come and say that this is random design? Such preciseness, such specific solutions. Precise, 4 degrees off, and then it's no longer able to support human life on Earth. So it's certainly an evidence of intelligent design. So therefore, the logical argument is, isn't law, order, or design a product of intelligence? Do we have in our experience, anywhere in our experience, that law, order, or design occurred without an intelligence behind it? So we have not, isn't it? So that's a logical argument. So therefore, the question arises, whose intelligence? Shouldn't this universe, with all its intricacies, with all its complexities, with all its specific beauty, from beauty to terrible majesty, have a super intelligent creator with a grand purpose? So what do scientists think? The best of scientists, again, we talk about Newton here, one of them, right? This most beautiful system of the sun, planets, comets could only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being. This is what he says. So this is true scientist. This is true scientific methodology. It's logical. So this is that personality, the supreme personality. There is a person behind it, right? And here we have another scientist, and another eminent person, Albert Einstein. Who doesn't know him? Everybody knows Albert Einstein, right? So when we say the word scientist, the two first names somebody will say is Einstein. The second word somebody will say is Newton. And these two people, what do they say? They say there is God. There is a perfect brain behind all the natural physical laws, right? And like that, there are many others, many other prominent, great, wondrous scientific minds along the years, founders of amazing discoveries. They have all said the same. Here we have another one. This is Lord Kelvin. You know, when we say Kelvin, temperature is measured in Celsius, and in scientific circles, it's measured in Kelvin. So like, for example, 273 degree Kelvin is 0 degrees Celsius. So like that. So it's named after him, Kelvin. And he is considered the father of thermodynamics, energy balance in heat. We owe the internal combustion engine of the car and all these things to Lord Kelvin. He developed the law of thermodynamics. So he says, overwhelming, strong proof of intelligent and benevolent design lie around us. Overwhelming. So much of proof is available all around us of a what? Of intelligent, benevolent design. The atheistic idea is so nonsensical that I cannot put it into words. So this is mentioned by some of the best of scientists. But still, what do we see nowadays? Nowadays, that's not the case, isn't it? So how do atheists argue their case? Atheists are people who know they don't want to accept God. So they mainly argue in terms of, they use science. They have hijacked the very science where the founders of science, the greatest exponents of science, are very much theists. They very much believe in God. But these so-called current scientists, they have hijacked in the name of science. And then this is their slogan: in science we trust. And what do they say? Everything comes from nothing. This is what they come and say. So is it in science we trust, or in science they hide? So the atheists, they actually hijack science and they hide behind this. And what do they say? Everything comes from nothing. So in the beginning, there was nothing and a huge bang occurred. And from there, Big Bang Theory. So this is what they have postulated. Okay, actually, there is some truth to it, because we have the same concept also in Bhagavad Gita, right? Remember, from Pradhan is the unmanifested material nature. From Pradhan then evolved into Prakriti, and then Prakriti is manifested, and then it starts to differentiate, so it becomes Mahat Tattva, and then from Mahat Tattva it created the entire universe. So it did begin from a single point. But the problem with the scientific theory of the Big Bang is, okay, from nothing, they say it's nothing. We don't say it's nothing. It is unmanifested. Pradhan, they say it's nothing because they cannot understand the concept of unmanifested. So they cannot measure it, they cannot detect it. So this is Pradhan. From Pradhan, it became Prakriti, and Prakriti evolved into Mahat Tattva, the entire universe. So this concept is actually stolen from the Vedas only. So basically, and ultimately, this is there. But then the scientists cannot explain what or who caused it. From nothing suddenly beginning, why? Why did this happen? Who caused this to happen? How did it happen? So they cannot explain this. Until now, they can't. So what is the explanation to that? They will give you a very elaborate term, but basically it means somehow. Somehow it happened. So here is what some of the greatest scientists will say. This is Alan Guth. He's an American theoretical physicist and cosmologist. Victor, and he's not a normal person. I'm choosing quotes of some of the eminent scientists in the world. He is a professor of physics in the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT professor in cosmologies. So he says the Big Bang theory says nothing about what banged, why it banged, or what happened before it banged. So that's the fact. And then here is another famous person, Swedish electrical engineer, plasma physicist, and winner of Nobel Prize in physics for his work on magneto hydrodynamics. Not an ordinary person, right? He says, and he was there when the Big Bang theory was proposed. So he says, I was there when Ab Georges Lemaitre first proposed this Big Bang theory. There is no rational reason to doubt that the universe has existed indefinitely for an infinite time. And then what he says, it is only myth that attempts to say how the universe came to be either 4,000 or 20 billion years ago, whatever. So it is myth. And currently myth is being pushed along as if it is established science. And if you were to not accept that, you would be termed as politically incorrect. And you'll be ridiculed and things like that. So this is being currently used as propaganda. So even such a person, he says this is myth to say how the universe came to be. Here's another towering intellectual, Geoffrey Barbridge, English astronomy professor and theoretical astrophysicist at the University of California. And he's the winner of the Bruce Medal, a very prestigious medal in physics. So he says Big Bang cosmology is probably as widely believed as has been any theory of the universe in the history of Western civilization. It rests, however, on many untested and in some cases untestable, just like Pradhan. They cannot test Pradhan. It's not possible for them. In untested and untestable assumptions. So they make assumptions which cannot ever be tested. This is not me saying, it's Geoffrey Bainbridge. Indeed, Big Bang cosmology has become a bandwagon of thought that reflects faith as much as objective truth. So it has become more like a faith. There's become a bunch of scientists who want to, out of faith, they just don't want to accept there is a creator. They just want to imagine certain myth which will give them a non-creator explanation about how creation takes place. So like that, then it is embarrassingly unscientific to speak of anything creating itself from nothing. So here's another famous scientist. So this is what has been happening nowadays. So in the name of science, a lot of nonsense and mythology is being pushed about. And I will tell you later what the reason is for. There is a reason behind why this is happening. So this is actual science. Actual science is basically you ask a question, you do some background research, and then based on your background research and your understanding about the question, you form a plan. So it's basically you construct a hypothesis, a plan. What's the how will you test this question? How will you go about trying to answer this question? So then you test your hypothesis with an experiment or something and see whether it's working. If it's not working, then go back and recheck your hypothesis, whether it's correct or not. Maybe it's time to change something. If it is working, then get the data and then analyze it to check and see whether it is valid. And then we need to see what conclusions we can draw from that, right? And see whether these conclusions match our hypothesis or not, our plan or not. So if it doesn't match, then our experiment is not working correctly. Go back to the beginning and change our hypothesis. Think of something new. So like that we do until we are able to get our results, and whether or not we are successful or not successful, we communicate these results to people to tell them this is our discovery or non-discovery. So this is science. So basically it is a search for truth. It is searching for truth. We are looking for truth. But then what's happening nowadays, it's what's called scientism. Remember just now we said some of these scientists, they have the famous ones, they have told how faith is being used as science now. So therefore the word scientism. Scientism is not science. It is actually faith based on science. Thinking that only science can explain everything. Nothing else can explain. So this is what they do. They create or plagiarize, just like, you know, the Big Bang Theory is actually plagiarized. The Big Bang Theory is from the Vedic scriptures only, right? From Pradhan, and then it become Prakriti, and then Mahatattva, and then, but they plagiarize this idea, and then they form their own model, which cuts off the existence of God or anything else. They come up with their own model, an atheistic model from a plagiarized idea. And then what do? They find or invent data. So they find or invent data. So this is not objective. That means they are not really interested in searching for the truth. They are actually having already a preconceived idea and agenda, and they're trying to fit data to suit that agenda. So they find or invent data which agrees with their agenda, which suits their model. And anything that doesn't agree, or anyone who criticizes it, okay, what they will do, they shoot it down, they discredit it, they pull strings, and then they do things. So this happens. It's been happening for almost a few hundred years already. Now it's much more. So, and then after that, at the end of this, they will shout to everyone, trust the experts, don't argue back, right? The experts have said so. And this is all based on a preconceived notion that they will claim scientific consensus has been established. All scientists in the world, they agree. They will talk like that. But actually, that's not the truth. The Big Bang Theory, not all scientists accept. Easily in almost half the scientists don't accept the Big Bang Theory, but they cannot, because there is some kind of an agenda behind this. There are powerful organizations, and there is a group of people who have systematically created this scientism for a purpose. So we'll talk about that later on. So it's truth versus agenda. Science is the search for truth, and scientism is a group of people who have an agenda, who are very powerful, very rich, very influential, and they have an agenda, and they have hijacked science to fit their agenda and to peddle it to the public who do not question. So this is basically what scientism is all about. So this is scientists then. Their motto was, I must find the explanation for this phenomenon in order to truly understand nature. What scientists now? Scientists now is, I must find the result that fits my narrative so I can get paid by the big pharma sponsor. So scientists now are no longer independent seekers of truth. They are basically paid people. And when you say paid people, then the scientists have already lost their independence. So they are no longer interested in the truth. They are interested in ensuring that their salary continues. So, and the salary comes when the scientists so-called discover or write about things which the people who are paying the salary like to hear. So, for example, pharmaceutical companies is one of it, right? So, trust me, the doctor will say, but actually I'm paid by big pharmaceuticals to tell you. So that is true. I will show you some evidence later. So therefore, this group of people, this capitalist, this bunch of influential, rich capitalists, they have basically they have done this, right? Rise in global arms trade, right? You can see how the global arms trade have increased over the years. They have introduced issues such as food security. Actually, there's no such thing as food insecurity. The world has enough land and enough resources to feed the population of the world easily. So what is happening now, because 80% of the world's resources are controlled by 20% of the world's capitalist elite. And this is why we have so-called food insecurity. And the same thing also, so it's actually it's a myth. It's not real. It's being pushed due to an agenda. Water insecurity, that's another issue which is being bandied about. This is another, it's not really the true scenario. So why they use food security and water security is because they want to push the agenda of genetically modified crops. You know, almost everything that we are eating, you know, if we buy soybean is already genetically modified. And if you buy canola oil, soybean oil, safflower oil, all this is genetically modified already, unless they tell you specifically it's not. Because most of these things come from Canada and from America, and there 50% of the crops are already genetically modified. And if you read the stories of the genetically modified, what goes behind genetically modified, you will be shocked. So it happens. And genetically modified is one, you know, like companies like Monsanto. So there is a lot of things, propaganda, which has been thrown about to give people a false idea. So the truth about drug companies, how they deceive us and what to do about it, the big pharma conspiracy. So this goes on. So a lot of things are there, right? So actually, this is real data. This is not just conspiracy theory I'm taking from the books. This is real data. This real data, I took it from a reputable site. It shows how the politicians in US, you know, in US, we have the Democrats and we have the Republicans, right? The Democrats and the Republicans, how much of money and how many candidates have been sponsored by pharmaceutical companies? The Democrats and the Republicans both. You can see here Republicans are more, 7 million USD, right? Up 214 candidates have been sponsored by pharmaceuticals. That's just pharmaceuticals, huh? They also have, you know, why gun lobby? You know, people are dying due to gunshots. Why they cannot do anything about it in the US? Because the Republicans and also some of the Democrats have been bought over by arms dealers. The people who produce guns, they have bought them. Many of their campaigns, because democracy is like that. You want to win your election, you need money. And where do they raise the money? So these are the people who come and sponsor them. So therefore, they have control of such politicians. So ultimately, who are the people behind this? The people behind this are the capitalists. There are names, right? Rockefeller, Gates Foundation, Bill Gates, what else? The Windsors, you know, Windsors are the British royals, even the Pope. So, and then there is so these kind of people, there are many, Bezos, what do you call, Zuckerberg. So some of them, these are capitalists, right? And there is a concession, there is an understanding behind them. So this is capitalism, where you can enslave fellow humans and rape the planet and be praised for your good business sense. So it doesn't matter. They are interested only in one thing. Their agenda is to push towards, now currently is 20% resource, 80% resources controlled by 20% of the capitalists. So they are pushing it, they are trying to even further narrow the divide. They are trying to make it 10% to 90%. So it's already coming close, 1090 already. 90% of the world resources controlled by 10% of the population. And on top of that, they are trying to cut down. They are trying to, there are lots of things happening. So this is basically the agenda behind. So, you know, some people will, there are lots of controversies and conspiracies. I don't want to go too much into these things, but I just want to show you. So how to disease monger. This is not new. All these things were already there. So this is common. Basically, the modern science is being pushed by pharmaceuticals. So there's lots of anyway, it's not basically, it's scientism. It's not the search for truth. So these people, this capitalist and all that, right? We don't want to go too much into all that. So I'm probably many of you know these things, or some of you, if you don't know, you can always read them up. So it's a lot, the truth is out there. So anyway, atheists. So these capitalists are obviously atheists, and their interest is simply wanton sense gratification. They are just looking for sense gratification for themselves, and it is fueled by greed. So you know the nature of greed. Greed is never satisfied, and they want only more and more and more and more. So it just goes on. So they are behind many of these so-called scientific myths, which is being pushed, because as I said, the scientists these days are very much controlled by the paychecks, and the paychecks are coming from the big people. So there is a certain pressure behind it. And in the same way, many of the so-called independent organizations of the world, such as the World Health Organization, or you know, the Federal Reserves, or so many of these things, they have fallen under this control. So therefore, they are able to push this kind of agenda in terms of education. Like, for example, there is evidence to show how Rockefeller has changed medical textbooks, how he has pushed for the change of drug dependency. So there's a lot of, in the past 50 years, there is a lot of dependency in drugs. It's no longer diagnostic medicine. It is more towards pharmaceutical medicines. So it is pushing towards that direction. And Rockefeller had also involved himself in education. You can see the same now, Bill Gates in foundation. Bill Gates is known for Microsoft, but you see Bill Gates when vaccines are talked about. When we talk about vaccines, you hear Bill Gates' name there. And you see him in cancer research. You see him in medical research. You see him in cryptocurrency. So there's a lot of meddling involved. So anyway, atheists, in science we hide. So they create this myth, life came by chance, everything came from nothing. So I was talking about the Big Bang Theory. So they didn't stop just at the Big Bang Theory. What they have gone on to say with the Big Bang Theory, they have said, okay, the Big Bang happened, and then from an infinitely dense matter, it expanded, exploded into the entire universe. And they are now telling that life also is created from this. So what happened? Billions and billions of years away, there were particles. And these particles then combined to form molecules. And these molecules combine to form more complex molecules. And then eventually more complex molecules form certain clusters of proteins. And so from certain clusters of proteins, eventually life was created. So this is called the primordial soup. You can Google that, primordial soup. This is what the scientists are saying. They are saying, okay, this is not only on Earth. In Earth, this has happened, but they have expanded that theory even to the entire universe. So they have said that in the beginning, 400,000 years ago, the Earth was a ball of hot gases which cooled down, and then after that it formed the first oceans, and then the land was very hot, And in that kind of situation, the temperatures were so high, there was meteorological situations happening, lightning and thunder going everywhere. The pressure was very high. So due to high pressure, due to high temperature, due to electricity from the lightning, suddenly a bunch of chemicals, they got struck by lightning or whatever, some energy process, and then life emerged. Life emerged. So this is called, this is not, it sounds like a fairy tale, but it's not. It's what's being pushed as the mainstream science. So they have a name for it. It's called molecular or chemical evolution theory of life. And it's a hypothesis based on framework laid by Alexander Oparin. If you Google the name Oparin, you'll find some things there. Anyway, 1924, and by this Haldane, 1925. So both of them got together and cooked up this theory, which is being pushed by these capitalists to all the scientists, whether they accept or not, and is being pushed as in education circles also around the world. So, right, we have this kind of ideas. These molecules then organized into 5 first molecular systems with properties of biological order. Okay, how did it happen? How? That they cannot explain. Their answer to that is somehow. So, and they will have some fancy ideas, right? So then the challenge is, okay, you're saying all this, very easily we can challenge them, which they cannot reply back to you, you know. They will say, okay, all this happened. So the challenge is, all right, now you are very advanced. The scientists, we have very advanced labs. We can simulate all kinds of things. So if we give you these chemicals, if we have very advanced systems and machinery which can simulate the same type of pressure, the same type of temperature, the same energy source can be introduced. So then can you produce life? But they cannot. So instead of admitting they cannot, you know what the scientists will say? They will tell you, oh, we are very close to developing this answer in another 20 years' time. So they will give you what we call a post-dated check. So they will tell you, we don't know the answer now, but they won't say that. They will say, oh, no, but people are working on it. The answers are very close. We will discover it. The secrets of immortality will be unlocked in the next few in year 2040 or something like that, they will tell you. So that's what's being pushed about in the name of science. So we have to be very careful. Why I'm telling you all these things is not to science has its purpose. You know, they say the best lie, you know, when we want people to believe in propaganda, when we want people to believe in an agenda which we are trying to push, psychologists tell you that the best way to do that is to sandwich the lie between 2 truths. You know, like a sandwich, you have a bread on top, you have a bread at the bottom, and you have the middle part, which is the filling. So the lie is in the middle, and it is sandwiched by truth. On top there's a truth, and below there's a truth, and you put the lie in between. So this way the lie is very carefully concealed. Normal people cannot detect it, and they will see the 2 truths which is covering, and they will swallow this sandwich bait, and they will pass it on as truth. So that happens. So anyway, back to it. You know, just now we were talking about the idea of intelligent design. So like this, the evolution of life, the theory of chemical evolution, and then we have another preposterous theory, which was created even before the theory of life came about. So I'm talking about I'm going to tell you what I'm talking about. So here, this is some archaeological findings. So these are so-called tools used by so-called early men. So if such crude tools like this needed a designer to produce this, because they don't accept that these rocks were naturally created. Despite all what they say, they don't accept that these rocks were naturally created. They say that these rocks were fashioned by someone. So if these rocks were naturally, it's not naturally created by fashioned by someone, then in what sense do they say that such a complex DNA the deoxyribonucleic acid, the DNA's spiral structure, so complex, with so much of protein in a certain shape, geometry, so much more complex than these prehistoric tools. And look at this creature. This is a jellyfish, very beautiful, so complex, the geometry, the colors, and they have the gall to say that these things are not created. These things came randomly. If artificial tools like this they cannot accept was created naturally, whereas these tools they are saying that was created randomly, so it doesn't make sense, isn't it? This one you need designer, this one you don't need designer, it came about randomly. So here's a Templeton Prize winner, another prominent scientist, Templeton Prize winner in 2019 from Dartmouth College in physics. So this is what he says: I think atheism is inconsistent with scientific method. So they reject atheism is not scientific. What I mean by that is, what is atheism? It's a statement, a categorical statement that expresses belief in non-belief. So I don't believe even though I have no evidence for or against, simply I don't believe, period. It's a declaration. So this is what atheists do. They declare, they don't have evidence. But in science, we don't really do declarations. We say, okay, you can have a hypothesis. Let's test your hypothesis and see. We don't work based on preconceived idea or notion. So that is atheism. So this is basically a summary of what atheism currently in the name of science is going about. Life came by chance. Chance. Everything came from nothing. The belief that there was nothing and that nothing happened to nothing. Suddenly, in the beginning there was nothing, then nothing happened to that nothing, and then that nothing magically exploded for no reason, creating everything which we see around us, including you, me, and everything. And then a bunch of everything magically rearranged itself for no reason whatsoever into self-replicating bits, which is able to replicate, mitosis, meiosis, the cells started replicating with life and eventually formed into dinosaurs, right? And this is called so-called scientism. This is not science, because as many of these scientists have already shown how these things are not based on evidence. It's based purely on conjecture with an idea. So why do they do this, right? I've already given the hint of capitalism, but we will talk about this a little further later on. But let's for a while pause and see, okay, yeah, but seriously, could life arise by chance? Is there even a remote possibility? So this person, Sir Fred Hoyle and Chandra Wickramasinghe, these are very famous scientists, leading mathematicians and astrophysicists. They try to show that the chance of this happening, what is the chance of this life being created randomly? It's like based on their mathematical calculation. They say it is a 1 in 10 to the power of 40,000. 10 to the power of 40,000. 1 in 10 to the power of 40,000 attempt. So this probability, the probability of this happening is even smaller than the number of atoms which are available in the universe. So scientists say that the number of atoms available in the universe is 10 to the power of 80. This is all the atoms which are there all over the universe, according to them. But this probability defeats even this. Look at this, 10 to the power of 40,000. Such a remote probability. But that's what they say. We say it's impossible. It cannot be done. There is no probability. So this same person, Sir Fred Hoyle, so he's telling everyone, right? The chance that higher life forms might have emerged in this way is as if you are saying, if you go to a metal junkyard full of all kinds of metal, scrap, everything, and then you send a tornado sweeping through that junkyard, And suddenly at the end of that tornado, you get a Boeing aeroplane, 747 aeroplane. So what is the probability of this happening? Can this ever happen? Is it ever going to happen that a tornado going through a junkyard and then everything spins around and then suddenly you get a fully fledged flying aeroplane? Is it possible? It's not possible, obviously. So they may calculate probability, make it very small, but it's basically science or fiction. But this is what's been going around in the name of science. So that's what they say. So, and finally, not finally, this is one of the earliest things they developed, the Darwin's evolution theory. So this is how life evolved from one, at least this one is not talking life created, out of the blue. The chemical theory says life came from chemicals. Suddenly from chemicals, suddenly life came. That's even worse. But that came from the Darwin theory only, because Darwin's theory predated that. This was developed first, and from here, they started pushing it towards chemical evolution theory. So let's look at this Darwin's theory and see what kind of science or fantasy is this. So they are saying, what is Darwin's theory? From a single cell, it became a more complex single cell, and then it became a multi-cell, and then from the multi-cell, it became human being. So this is Darwin's evolution theory. So again, in science, we hide. So this is life on Earth. So therefore, they come and say this is the Precambrian era, 400,000 years ago, 400,000 to 400 million years ago, sorry. So during this time, Earth was in a very hot situation. Single cell microbes, the germs were created suddenly out of the atoms and the molecules. And then they formed more complex life form, and then they became sea life forms. And then from the sea life forms, they became amphibians. From amphibians, they became reptilians. From reptilians, they became birds and mammals. And then from them, from the birds and mammals, we developed this kind of primate. And then this kind of primate came about, and then human beings came. So this is Darwin's theory. So this is basically Darwin's theory also. From this dinosaur, it develops, this reptile suddenly became a mammal. From this mammal, it went into the sea, and then it developed legs like this. It became something like this. Then it became this, then it became this, then it became this, then it became the whale. This is the blue whale. It all came from this reptile creature that used to hop around and go and bite things. This is fact. This is not fact. This is real so-called Darwin theory. Fact or fantasy? So if that's the case, then human beings are going towards a very strange evolution. Because if it's true that we came from this, now what human beings are doing? Most human beings are now hunched over a computer. So probably their fingers will shrink in 40 years' time. And then we will, instead of having fingers, we will have probably tentacles or what, I don't know, according to their evolution theory. So anyway, let's not go further. So evolution theory fails to explain. There are deep flaws in the evolution theory. So we are going to highlight some of these flaws. Why are apes and monkeys not extinct? Because according to evolution theory, right, this creature is extinct, this creature is extinct, this 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 is there. So it's all no longer existing, and this is the final current evolution. So it's changing, right? So if you look at human beings also, the chimpanzee is there, but everything else is extinct in between. And suddenly the human being is there. So evolution theory fails to explain why apes and monkeys are not extinct when every other creature is extinct. The ancestor of every other creature is extinct. But why the so-called ancestor of the man, which is the monkey, not extinct? And can we say that if we take this monkey and we put it in a certain situation, if we put this monkey to school, to human school, And then after hundreds of years, this monkey will slowly become a human being. Does it work that way? Is that evolution? And then where are the intermediate links? Where are these other so-called, in between links to human being? So let's see what Darwin had to say. This is what he said towards the end of his life in the 19th century. He confesses, not one change of species into another is on record. We cannot prove that a single species has changed. Right? And then this is 20th century, Dr. Austin Clarke, the then president of and biologist of the Smithsonian Institute. If you know what's the Smithsonian Institute, it's a very famous institute in the US. It's famous for scientific discoveries in biology and things like that. So he says, there is no evidence which would show man developing step by step from lower forms of life. There is no such thing as missing links. But then again, this is what Darwin said in the earlier times. He says, I'm a firm believer that without speculation, there is no good and original observation. So he admits he was simply speculating. Speculating is the scientific word for daydreaming. So speculation. So using speculation, he pushed his idea. And then he also writes, but he admits here and there, you will be greatly disappointed. The forthcoming book, The Origin of Species, the book he wrote about the evolution theory, it will be grievously too hypothetical. No evidence to link, no support. So therefore, science or fiction, I ask you. Evolution is not an established theory, but a tentative hypothesis. It is not universally accepted. This is admitted by Thomas Huxley, who was one of the most vigorous supporter of Darwin at that time. Even he admitted that it is just a hypothesis. And this is by Bonneau, director of the National Center of Scientific Research in France. Evolution is fairy tale for grown-ups because it is based on, as I said just now, daydreaming, right? It is based on speculation. Just to push the point, I want to just give a very simple, I want to just show a simple example of a very simple creature. So we go to zoology class. I want to introduce to you this very interesting and amazing creature. It's called the bombardier beetle. So this bombardier beetle, it looks like an easy target for predators. But you know what this bombardier beetle can do? If it comes into trouble, at the back near its buttocks, it has something like an exhaust pipe. And from this exhaust pipe, it is able to fire super hot corrosive chemical from its rear in a rapid fire, like a shot, like a cannon shot, which can burn the skin and blind the enemies. So that's why it's called bombardier beetle. It's like a beetle with a cannon in its buttocks. So it's able to, in this way, this is a self-defense. So this is the half-inch of marvel of God. So this bombardier beetle is very interesting and unique, right? It is able to shoot out noxious spray which explodes from its body at a boiling 100-degree temperature Celsius. Can you imagine? A beetle like this, it is able to shoot out fume. This is real. It appeared in the Time magazine. It was reported that time in 1985. So what it does is, it has a chamber, 2 chambers inside it. It has a chamber of enzymes. It has a chamber of this chemical hydrogen peroxide and some hydroquinones. When you mix these 2 enzymes together, an explosion takes place. And this explosion is shot outwards towards the enemies threatening this beetle. So there might be a problem. You might ask, okay, according to Darwin, how did bombardier beetle evolve this system? Because there are big problems here. How does it prevent its own body from exploding? It's able to shoot out at such boiling temperature towards the enemy, how is it able to do this? So the solution, very nice solution, it prevents this with the help of an inhibitor. An inhibitor, which is usually mixed inside its body, it prevents the explosive chemical reactions from taking place. Very nice. But what does it do when it wants to create the explosion? So when it wants to create the explosion, how does it generate it? Because naturally there's an inhibitor. So how do you get the explosion to happen? So the solution, there is an enzyme which creates an anti-inhibitor, which is added to the other chemicals, and explosive reaction occurs. Because this anti-inhibitor will remove the inhibitor, and when there's no inhibition, then the explosion occurs. And in this way, the beetle is able to direct the explosion outside its body and shoot at its enemies. So then you might ask, but what kind of exhaust pipe it might have to be able to shoot it at 100-degree temperature, 100 degrees Celsius? How is it able to not destroy itself? So it must have a very strong combustion chamber, right? So solution, yes, it has the necessary equipment, including twin tail tubes made out of insect cartilage, which is able to shoot it at a very thin volume. So the volume shoots out so that it doesn't have enough time to actually melt that cavity. So these tubes can be aimed at enemies in a 180-degree arc. So therefore the name bombardier beetle. This is true, right? So is creation of beetle an example of the impersonal plus time plus chance scenario, which is being shown about by the so-called mainstream science? Or is it an example of a special, intricate creation by God who is intimately involved with his creatures? So this conclusion is given not by me or Hare Krishna devotee, is given by the person who studied this bombardier beetle, this Duane Gish. He has a PhD, and this is what he concludes. So the Darwinian history, the Darwinian theory is not the result of scientific research, but purely the product of imagination. Not I'm saying, Dr. Fleischmann, Erlangen zoologist. And this is again Lord Kelvin. If you think strongly enough, you will be forced by science to believe in God. So this is naturally the conclusion of science. Everything in this world is made in such a way, if we only think deep enough, we will be forced to conclude that actually there is God. There's no way there is no God. So that is the ultimate conclusion we will come to. And anything else otherwise is propaganda, systematic propaganda by a group of people for a specific agenda. So the theory of evolution suffers from grave defects, which are becoming more and more apparent as time advances. But still, right, we have the capitalist group of people who are very influential, and they are able to, despite the more and more apparent defects, they are still able to push this to textbooks in school children in many of the countries around the world. So we are in an Islamic country. So Islamic country doesn't accept this. So that's why we don't hear this. If we were in US or in any other country which is atheistic, then definitely we would have grown up accepting all these things, and we would not have questioned any of this. So I'm coming close now towards the real reason why this is happening. So here is a confession by an atheist scientist, Arthur Keith. He is a Scottish anatomist, medicine, anthropologist as well, Hunterian professor and conservator of the Hunterian Museum of the Royal College of Surgeons of England. And he has lots of political connection with the Windsors, who were the royal family ruling England. So I mentioned some of these capitalist names, right? So, and he says, evolution is unproved and unprovable. We believe it only because the only alternative is special creation. So can you see this? We believe it only because the only alternative is special creation. What is special creation? Special creation means creation of God. So and that is unthinkable. So that is the reason science has gone this direction. Why is it unthinkable? So Prabhupada says, no, he says, systematically there is propaganda by a section of people to stop glorification of the name and fame of the Supreme Lord. So there are a bunch of people who don't want faith in the Lord. So here's another quote from T. Rosenzweig in his book Unfinished Animal. The main purpose, so he gives a deeper understanding of what this Arthur Keith said. We don't want to believe in special creation. It's unthinkable. Why? Therefore comes Darwinism, is to push further the agenda of this concept that we don't want a personal God. So the main purpose of Darwinism was to drive away every last trace of an incredible God from biology. So this is their purpose. They are trying to push out religion. They are trying to push out the belief and faith in God. This is a systematic propaganda which is taking place, which started from the West. Why? So this we have to think, right? Why is this? Why are they doing this? So naturally, the reason is freedom. Freedom for what? Because what does religion do? You know, when, you know, Hare Krishnas, oh, Hare Krishnas, we don't eat meat, we don't eat onion, garlic, so many rules, so many regulations. Oh, we shouldn't, no meat eating, no intoxication, no illicit sexual activity, no gambling. So this is what they want. They want all these things. So freedom, they want freedom to do whatever they want. So therefore, we have this famous person, George Bataille. To choose evil is to choose freedom. Freedom, emancipation from all restraint. Because if we want freedom, then there is nothing to stop us from doing whatever we want, to whoever we want, to get whatever we want, isn't it? So that is ultimately what and America's founding constitution is freedom, based on freedom. And this is what the capitalists want also. They want freedom. They want to push this agenda so that they can manipulate and control the world. They want to manipulate and control the economy, and they want to get what they want. So it's greed, ultimately. And that's why this concept of freedom is being pushed everywhere. So nowadays, you will see lots of propaganda on freedom. Oh, if somebody says you shouldn't do this, no, they are bad. Freedom, you know, we should have freedom of speech, freedom of everything. So there is the problem here. That has not helped people, right? Isn't it? Where has all this freedom brought us? Has it made life better? But why? Why people want to have freedom? Freedom from all restraint. Because ultimately, they want the freedom to sin. That is the goal. They want the freedom to have illicit sexual activity. They want the freedom to have, murder, kill. They want the freedom for gambling. They want the freedom for intoxication. They want to do that. So that is the ultimate goal. So they are pushing towards an agenda of capitalism, and capitalism is the fuel which fuels hedonism. Hedonism is this kind of culture, sinful culture, to do whatever you want. So, and this is mentioned by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna will ask Krishna, O descendant of Vrishni, by what is one impelled to sinful acts? Why people want to do this? Why people want freedom to sin? So Krishna says, Kama Esha, Krodha Esha. It is lust only, Arjuna. It is lust. Due to lust, which is born out of contact of the mode of passion, right? And this is, and what does Krishna describe this lust as? He describes this lust as the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. So that is the big problem. This is our ultimate enemy, lust. And this lust, especially amongst the powerful and the influential, it has far-reaching consequences. So many creatures are killed every day. Billions, every heartbeat, there are millions of creatures being killed just to put food on the plate of a person. You know, and it goes on. So many newborn children are killed due to abortion. The statistics are staggering. You will find that almost every day there are, in Malaysia alone, there is about 50 cases in a week. Somewhere I read, in Malaysia alone, 50 cases in a week. And this is a Muslim country. Yeah? Can you imagine in a capitalistic country, what kind of situation goes on? So this is capitalism. And capitalism ultimately is to, they want to create their own class system. So in an artificial, they push for their own class system. One rule for us, another rule for all of you. So it's not justice anymore, it's just us, right? Minus the I. It's not justice, it's just us, just them. So, and the rest of them, rest of us can burn, and we can, all that can happen, they don't care, as long as they get what they want. So that is ultimately freedom. And that's what freedom has done to the world. So this is, we will end here with this final slide I'm going to put here for us to question, right? So this guy is Jeffrey Dahmer. He's a serial killer, and not only he kills people, so many people he had killed, but after killing them, he ate them. So he's a cannibal. And at least he's an honest atheist, because he's also an atheist. And then when people question him, why are you doing all these things? So he says, if a person doesn't think there is God to be accountable to, that means if you don't believe in God and you have nobody to really, answer to, there's no one to, stop you or to answer to, then what's the point of trying to modify your behavior to keep it within acceptable range? Because there's no God to set the rule. There's no God to set the standard if you don't believe in God, right? So why should I accept your rule? You are telling me I shouldn't kill him, but then you allow me to kill others. Like, for example, during a war, it's okay to kill the Vietnamese, but it's not okay to kill the American. So that's during the Vietnam War. Huh? So now like that. So why one rule here, one rule there? You set the rule, but what if I don't accept your rule? So like that, why should I accept what you set? I will do what I want to do, because everybody is free. There is no restraint. So if that is happening, can you imagine the chaos in the world? So this is the type of people we will get, right? If the atheistic agenda is pushed all the way. So this is not the plan of the Lord. This is not what's going to happen. So, but this is Kali Yuga, 432,000 years to go, 428,000 years to go. So it's described in the Bhavisha Purana. It is said that by the time Kali Yuga comes towards its close, this kind of people will be there everywhere. And it says that the descriptions are there. It's given in Bhagavatam, it's given in Bhavisha Purana. It tells how society would have degraded to such an extent that people would live only up to 25 years. If they live up to 25 years, they are considered very fortunate. And they will not have qualms to eat their own offspring, their own children, and eat, and it is a very fallen life, a fallen situation. It's moved this is towards the end. And at that time, the Lord will come as Kalki and Sadhunam Paritranam to save the pious and to annihilate the miscreants. Duskritam, Vinashana. So in this way, re-establish again. So this is what will happen. But that we don't have to fear that, right? So the pious are always saved. If one is pious, if one is God-fearing, if one accepts the instructions given by the Lord, we will not live to see such things. We will, after this end of this life, we will return back to his lotus feet. And all those who are sinful from across the universe, they will be taking birth during Kali Yuga as Kali Yuga progresses further and further. So I'm not done yet. This is a long presentation. Spiritual, scientific spirituality. We will continue again in the next session. So more things we will discuss about. Okay. So with that, we'd like to end with something positive. Food for the soul. So we've had dinner, or we may not have had dinner. So let's also have dinner for the soul. So chanting is that food for the soul, sadhana. So let us chant this Mahamantra together. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki, Jai Sri Krishna Bhagavan ki, Jai Bhagavad Gita ki. So thank you very much, all of you. So any questions anyone wants to raise? I hope it was not too shocking, whatever I spoke.
Very interesting today, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu. But questions next week and next week's or what? Later, got 50 to ask.
Okay, thanks. Good. Yeah, bring your questions. We can discuss them next time. So anyone else, anything want to say? If you have questions or anything? You're not well, Nirmala Mataji? Coughing?
Slightly, just some throat irritation.
Okay. Anyway, so thank you so much, all of you, for attending and spending your time. I'm very, very grateful. So it gives me an opportunity to know some service I'm doing for my spiritual master. It sharpens my something. So I really am grateful for all of you. So thank you. So we will.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
I'll see you all next week. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.